Mthweni has emphasized that the conference will get underway tonight still, with President Cyril Ramaphosa closing it on Sunday.
So we want to make sure that everything is thorough. Everyone who attends here, we don't want to be litigated. You know that many provincial conferences have gone to court purely on process matters. So we are trying to make sure that all the processes are fine, everything is done, but I can confirm that the conference will proceed today. The Secretary General will open this particular conference, and the President will close the conference on Sunday.
Now, the ANC has until Wednesday to hand over its Cadre Deployment Committee records to the DA. It comes after the Johannesburg High Court dismissed the ANC's appeal last week. To unpack the story further, joining me now is governance expert Dr. Mathebula. Dr. Mathebula, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. In this matter, the ANC looks determined to fight tooth and nail. And on the other hand, the DA has a point to prove. They're specifically interested in President Ramaphosa's actions when he chaired the ANC's Deployment Committee. What stands out for you as you make sense of what's happening with the matter?
Good evening, Paul, and good evening to your listeners, and thank you again. Look, I want to characterize this thing firstly the same way as Dr. Rakoma said, that this is just political gamesmanship. People are playing politics about it. But the truth of the matter is that the ANC might be responsible for society to question cadre deployment or deployment of its members that are able to do the work in the public service. I'm saying this thing very calculated. Mpo, you'd remember when Nelson Mandela took over in 1994, the first cohort of ANC members or cadres that were deployed into the public service, they were men and women of such impeccable character and credentials that this matter of questioning members of the ANC that end up becoming senior members of the public service was not an issue because of the caliber and the quality of the people that were deployed at the dawn of the democracy. We're talking here men and women at the level of Reverend Frank Chikane, Dr. Paseka Ncholo, Professor Willem Komo, Yvonne Wising, Renosi Mukate. I can mention a lot of great men and women that went into that public service and delivered. Then Thabo Mbeki came in. He continued with the same principle of saying, let's take the best men and women and put them there. And one of the best people that was there was the CEO of the Zondo Commission, Professor Itumeleng Musala, and many other people in Thabo Mbeki's era, Mujanku Gumbi, Frank Chikane again, and many others. But as soon as the quality of the people that were deployed into the public service and into parastatals started to dwindle and decline, society started to question the correctness of allowing the ANC to have a monopoly of deploying people into the public service and state-owned entities. And this is where we should characterize the problem, to say the DA might be playing games, but the truth of the matter is that the DA itself, it has been recruiting and deploying capable cadres and people that are, some of them are even from the ANC. I'll take an example of a man that I know who was a good municipal manager in Mogalakwena and other places, Rekobits Makobe, who is still being pursued by some DA municipalities to come and be a municipal manager there. The truth of the matter is that they are looking at his character and what he has done before. But the problem is, if the ANC in deploying or if the ANC in recruiting people into those positions, it brings and it allows nepotism, It allows uneducated people, which there is evidence, that end up being in this position. It allows people that can't even read the report. Then this becomes questionable. Now, what about this case? Yeah. The DA is just going to get the political capital out of this case, because in terms of the Paja Act, yes, they have a right to get access to the minutes of the deployment committee to understand that who did that deploy. And I can tell you now, all they want to know is to confirm what they already have. Because they know on those deployment committee meetings, there are people that were not of impeccable credentials, that were deployed into certain positions, and those people are factory faults, they are miscarriages of the noble thing. And that is the challenge that this thing is bringing into this thing of saying, can we look at people that can do the work? And if the ANC is the governing party and it wants people that can do the work, nothing stops them to recruit them wherever they are and ask them. Whether you interpret that as deployment or whatever, it's another story. But as long as they're recruiting the right men and women to be there, in as much as the DA is allowed, in as much as the EFF will be allowed, in as much as and all other parties will be allowed, then there's no problem as long as this thing is not used to do, to do social engineering in the public service. And I think what the DA is pushing in this case, it is not debating the substantive issues of this thing to say, if this thing was done correctly, would it be a problem for a government that is in charge to make sure that it looks for the correct men and women, even if we have got to go outside the country and get the best to come back to the country, like President Mbeki did when he personally recruited the Vice Chancellor Academic at UNISA, Irish Muche, to come back there, who was a professor of mathematics in University of Washington. I don't think the DA is saying the ANC must not do that. I don't think the DA is saying the ANC cannot recruit nuclear physicists that are outside of the country to come and help us in case we decide to do a nuclear power plant. I don't think the DA, if it's doing that, then their fight against cadre deployment, it's a proxy for black excellence.
So you're saying that as you go back and reference the history of the chairs, past chairs of the committee, that there isn't necessarily a discernible trend to appointments made under the different chairs of the committee. But the dynamics that come to play in assessing the committee's powers, especially looking, for instance, at how the process on judicial appointments are made, as opposed to what we saw, Dr. Mathebula, for instance, during President Zuma's era, when people were appointed to Transnet and how some appeared to have been deployed to literally loot.
Yes, and that's exactly my point. What I'm not saying is that there was no mistakes about the deployment, the cadre deployment thing. There were a lot of mistakes. There were a lot of miscarriages of a good thing. And because of that, the ANC, as we speak now, it is in a phase of renewal. It needs to review this policy of cadre deployment and say to itself that if it's still a policy of cadre deployment, how do they do it in such a way that they do not look like they are encouraging the wrong people to be there? Firstly, they should not actually hold meetings about that and have minutes about that, and agree we should do that. They must bloody take their cadres and put them into a training program, have 100 chartered accountants who are ANC members. Then when there's a post that is being advertised and we need a chartered accountant, phone your ANC members to apply. They must first qualify because they are chartered accountant before they are ANC members. And if they get in because they are chartered accountant, and then you say, then their bonus is that they are chartered accountant, but they are members of the ANC, you have an advantage that your policy direction is not going to be there. Because whoever wants to believe that what the ANC has bequeathed to this country is not what this country is all about, you're making a mistake. Because the National Democratic Revolution, which the ANC advocates, it's actually the basis of the constitution that we have. If you read what the National Democratic Revolution is, what the documents of the ANC are talking about, a new South Africa, you read the constitution, you realize that marginally the ANC has been able to put everything that it needed into there. Now, when it wants people that understands the basis of that thing to lead, the mistake the ANC did was to want to be the one that puts those people where they are supposed to be, when they were supposed to take people, to be trained, to be ready, that when these things happen, they come in there, they have an advantage that they are ANC members. If they want better judges who are members of the ANC, they must go and recruit advocates and senior advocates and put them in a political school. Then when they apply, they know that these guys, they have our hegemony in their minds. And that's what other parties are doing. I don't know why the ANC wants to gerrymander this thing to its detail and think that society is going to stop. That time when the ANC was leading society alone, it's over. Yeah. Society is now being led by everybody.
In one of your articles, you say that while the country is still bleeding from the political, social and reputational wreckage caused by the revelations of the Zondo Commission submissions and evidence leading, there's an attempt to bracket some of the ANC reputation, destroying truths about individuals contesting for leadership. I mean, in looking at that, what impression has this now presented to society?
Yes, that is the challenge, and that's why for all his good sins or otherwise, when President Ramaphosa stood up and made a statement, a very profound statement, he said, why is the ANC is not alone in the dock of what has happened in the country? It is number one accused in corruption. You remember when President Ramaphosa said that, and I think I'm quoting him well. That was when he was introducing the idea of renewal. He is not saying that the ANC as a whole is corrupt, but he is saying the things that they have done over a certain period, whether it's the 9 wasted years or until now, the things that they have done, they have impacted on their reputation to lead society alone. They still have the capacity to can lead society, but they must understand that the area where they were alone during the anti-apartheid struggle and the first 15 years of our democracy, they are no longer alone there. There are many other people. Civil society movements are there. Everybody is there. And interestingly, some of the people that are opposing it in the civil society movement, they are still card-carrying members of the ANC, which means the leader of society responsibility of the ANC is no longer a party matter. It's a social matter. It's a civil society matter. The ANC must understand that it cannot gerrymander who gets into government. It can only gerrymander what government delivers in terms of its policies and allow skills, talent, merit, and people that can do the job to get into the job and deliver for South Africa. The example of Mpoma at ESCOM should give them an immediate indication that after they've done all the other things and they went and pulled a person that has masterminded the Equity Act and many other things, and gave him ESCOM to deliver. We're now at 2 hours load shedding, and we're improving. So they must learn from the good things that they've done in the past and do them and stop wanting to impose some of the wrong things that they are doing on society, claiming nostalgia.
Dr. Mathebula, very quickly before we let you go, I mean, just your reaction at Parliament slamming Chief Justice Raymond Zondo over his comments on state capture. What do you make of that?
Look, basic public administration and political science says a person of Judge Zondo's stature, when he stands and he speaks, he's a person of influence. He will say what he says. But what Judge Zondo said in that conference at the HSRC, he said nothing different from what he has written in the Zondo Commission report. So anybody who challenges Judge Zondo about what he said, they are actually challenging the Zondo Commission report. Let them go and have the report under review, because he has done the report and he's working on the report. He's a judge. He's not stupid to get out of the mandate that he has as a judge. He's got to be neutral. He's got to be seen that he's a judge of he's the Chief Justice of South Africa, the largest economy. He cannot take political sides. And I don't think Chief Justice Zondo will be that careless. I think some of the comments are misplaced, if not political, but as I say, South Africa is a very dynamic society, but the Chief Justice, what he spoke, it was Chief Justice-like.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time, governance expert and Think Foundation CEO, Dr. Lucky Mathebula.